And I actually can't see the questions when I'm in front of the page.
Becky's going to monitor.
So Becky's going to monitor the questions.
So what we're going to do is we're going to record, teach us, and then this will go viral to 17 million people. We're going to label it Microsoft SharePoint sort of hybrid and Chilean rescue, Chinese rescue, whatever.
Are we ready? Are we recording? All right, greetings everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Do I need to stay right here mostly or next to the PC?
It doesn't matter.
All right. So I guess we have quite a few online, but not so many here in person. That's okay. My name is Daubert. I'm with Covenant Technology Partners. This is my right there. My Twitter, if you want to follow me, I do tweet intermittently. And then there is my email if you have questions or want to give. So the reason I brought this topic to light today is I was just discussing with Becky is I've sort of seen myself a little bit of a trend in customers or clients asking about this particular solution. Becky and I were discussing it. We were like, thought this was a topic that was kind of years in the past. Who's going to do hybrid now? And it seems like Microsoft is listening a little bit more to customers who actually want to do this and why they would want to do this. So I thought I would bring it up and sort of dive into it a little bit, just to get out there that maybe there are some people who are considering this. They haven't gone to the cloud yet. They want to know what this is about. As we know, the Midwest moves a little slower than everybody else. So maybe your company hasn't went all in with O365 yet. So what are your options? And what are you going to get out of hybrid? Or what do you need to do to even entertain the idea of hybrid? So the first one is, what is hybrid? So for Microsoft, essentially it's a hybrid environment that enables enterprise users to be connected from almost anywhere to the resources and content they need. That's general and makes sense, but that's kind of the way that they present it. You're moving around, but you still need to get to the data that you need to get to. And in a hybrid scenario, that might be on-premise, but you also might be in the cloud. So you want to be able to get to both of those environments no matter where you're at. The hybrid functionality in SharePoint Server and Office 365 essentially is what you think a hybrid is. It extends your on-premise investment to the cloud, integrates services and workloads to the environment that meets your needs. So essentially that's what it does. That's what it is. It all kind of makes sense when we hear the word hybrid, what it is. But with SharePoint or O365, we'll say SharePoint hybrid. What do you really get? And so we're going to get into that in a minute. So Microsoft's point of view used to be the hybrid solution was a bridge to get you to the cloud. Their end goal always has been, up until I think recently, to get everybody to the cloud. That's what they want. That's their product. They want everybody to get there. But I think what they're trying to do now is extend the hand to those who, for whatever reason, which we'll go into in a little bit later, might not go to the cloud fully, or they might only go into the cloud partially. And so I think Microsoft has come up with a better philosophy, which is now it's viewed as more of a viable solution for clients or customers that cannot or will not go to the cloud. Because at the end of the day, you can argue with a client all day long and give them reasons why it's secure, why it's more cost effective, blah, blah, blah. But it's their environment. It's the CEO and the director of IT and whoever making these decisions. It's their decision. If they don't want to go, they don't have to go. So it's up to them. So Microsoft, I think, has invested a little bit more documentation, a more stable service when it comes to a hybrid solution, and it works pretty well. So I think that's the reason I wanted to bring this up, at least where I'm working now. We've had a few clients ask about this. We've actually implemented it for one client. So it seems like this is creeping back up here in this area about, well, what do we do? We're now finally ready to do something. What are our options? So why does one need hybrid? So the main question you need to answer there is, do I need it, right? Yes or no? Well, how do you know? First thing you gotta do, which probably goes without mentioning it, but I mention it all the time anyway, is you have to address all of your business requirements. We always say that in these presentations, and ironically, you'll find out that most people only sort of address their business requirements, and they never really truly flush it out. So before somebody jumps into something like a hybrid solution, we want to partially go to the cloud, things like that, you've got to address your requirements around how do you want your users to collaborate? What kind of data do they need to get to? Is it secure? Is it not secure? Blah, blah, blah. Storage requirements, accessibility requirements, productivity. How do you want your users to get stuff done? You know, or you want to implement a hybrid solution so that people can get to the information that they need without setting up a complicated VPN solution or something like that. There's ways that you can do this with hybrid, so you got to look at those kinds of things. There's always legal ramifications for a company in moving to the cloud. Everybody knows that, and we kind of always have to deal with that. Microsoft provides contracts, NDAs, BAAs. They'll do whatever you want to do to get you to the cloud. You might not get the data, you might have PHI, PII, whatever it is that you're trying to secure. Microsoft will work with you on that, but there are companies that just simply will not do it for whatever their reasons might be. So that is a very viable solution in a hybrid for some of those companies who still want to keep data secure and in their control and still use some of the services and the functionality that you're going to get out of SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business. Yes?
Somebody asked a question, Ian Kaiser asked, are there any white papers from Microsoft?
Hybrid solutions, and the roadmaps also go through the steps that I'm not going to go into as much detail today about how to implement those different roadmaps. I don't have links to actual white papers though. I can look them up and provide them in a later meeting.
But there's help documentation.
Yes, there is. This goes without saying. Oops, sorry, I went too fast. Goes without saying, you have to address your costs. Everybody already knows that. We already kind of know in the business it's relatively cheaper to go to the cloud, but there are reasons that you may not. But you still need to address, backup solutions, DR solutions, patching, licensing. In fact, and I were discussing that before I started presenting. So I did put it in there, but there's some ramifications there. So if you're spinning up an O365 tenant, but you're still keeping an on-premise environment, you're still keeping those on-premise costs and incurring more costs in a hybrid solution. So those are things that you have to think about, but if the hybrid makes more sense, then, obviously you're going to want to go with that. Something else to evaluate is functionality. Do you have custom solutions? Or are you having third-party app integrations in your on-premise environment? Those kind of workloads are going to have to be moved to the cloud if you go all into the cloud. But if you don't want to go all into the cloud and you're doing a hybrid scenario, you might not have to deal with those app integrations yet. But you can still get some of the services, processes in O365, and still access your data and get to what you need to get to in a hybrid scenario. Some of this just goes along with trying to evaluate whether you want to go to O365 yet or not, but it helps you in deciding whether you want to go with a hybrid. And as usual, I always stress this, you have to plan out your security and sharing requirements. It's much different in the cloud. Still much different, even if you're in a hybrid scenario. You're opening your tenant and your environment up to different security concerns that you may not have to deal with in an on-premise environment. You lock it down, you already know it's locked down, you know exactly where it's locked down. You move to a tenant and you're starting to use SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business, Teams, and things like that. Your security then sort of opens back up again, and you've got to wrangle that in and decide what it is that you want, what you want to do with it. So reasons that you may actually want it. Your content can be hosted in the cloud for legal or business reasons. It's kind of general, and it's kind of up to the company. But you can walk them through it, try to feel out what it is that they're looking for or what they need, maybe try to address some concerns, get them in touch with Microsoft for legal things as far as data. And that just might be the reason right there. I just don't want to. I've actually heard that. I don't want to. I don't want to move my data to the cloud. I don't trust it. Okay, but you're telling me that you want to use some of these services, so there might be a way that we can do both. So that's kind of where we're at with that. You would like to slowly transition to the cloud. There are some people that can embrace the idea of, say, a 6 months project to move from on-prem to the cloud. Move an Exchange Online, move an SharePoint Online, or a year for that matter. There are some people that put this on their roadmap. It's a 3 to 5 year thing. We're going to move things in steps. So hybrid is a good way to get there. You're in both environments, but they're still sort of connected, and you get access to their data. Now you break down some of the hybrid what you're going to get. A good example would be a lot of companies map home drives to user computers. Move those to OneDrive for Business. Free in quotes, every user gets a terabyte of data. That's a great way to move home drives. You know, people are trying to get rid of file shares and put it in SharePoint or OneDrive. Still get to your OneDrive data from an on-premise environment in a hybrid scenario. Access on-prem data from the cloud. Works both ways. You can do both. Search from on-premise. Exchange Online, Teams, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business. Of course, that is always security trimmed. Search is always security trimmed. If you don't have access to the data, you don't see it when you search for it. Works the same in a hybrid scenario. Easy external sharing without the need for extra infrastructure. This is a big thing for people maybe wanting to go to a hybrid solution. I want to keep my data here, but we don't really have anything. It's a secured environment, but we don't really have anything in place to work with outside vendors or other companies that, say, the HR department deals with on a daily basis for payroll or things like that. We don't have a place to collaborate. You can set some stuff up in O365 and still be able to give them access to their on-prem data, security trimmed in a hybrid scenario. It's still secured, and it's still hosted on-prem, and it's not in the cloud. You can replace third-party file sharing with OneDrive for Business. That kind of goes without saying, but Microsoft mentions it, so I do. You want to get rid of Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, the companies using that kind of thing. OneDrive for Business is that's what Microsoft's solution is. It's a fantastic solution, and it works really well in a hybrid environment. Then again, each transition to the cloud is spanned over a longer time. There are a lot of companies, they're taking 3 years to do a move to O365. Let's get help with that, or they can just not do a hybrid and simply just do it as they need to do it. So what do you get with a hybrid? So one of the features is hybrid OneDrive for Business. It's file sync and share. It redirects your My Sites and your profiles on-premise to O365 where you're using OneDrive for Business. Once you get the hybrid scenario in place, all of the user's data will be in OneDrive for Business. You click on their My Site on an on-prem environment, it takes them to the cloud, they log in, all their data is there. You'll have to come up with, if users are extensively still using my sites, a plan to migrate that data to OneDrive, but once you put this in place, it just simply redirects. So in a brand new solution, this is really easy to set. Hybrid search and site features, which we're going to get into a little bit more depth here, because that's really the main focus of Microsoft's hybrid scenario. Search cloud and on-prem, one way or bi-direction. Depending on the solution that you choose, you can go one way outbound, one way inbound, or you can do both ways. Followed sites is also a hybrid feature, so I don't know that many companies that use it, but it is there. So when you click on a site and I follow it on an on-prem environment, that process now moves up to the cloud. It's in the SharePoint root home directory, and you see all your followed sites. B2B extranet, I always found this one a little bit ambiguous. It's essentially, what they're saying here is, my little red dot doesn't work very well on the screen. Essentially, you can set up sites in O365 to work with outside vendors that are simply managed by admins. And they give you a fancy term for it, but really what it means is just a site in O365 with external sharing enabled. It's really locked down, and admins are the owners of the site rather than say. So you can set up some external facing sites very easily. It's not necessarily a function of hybrid, but they sort of sell it as that. I never quite understood that one, so don't take too much. That one's not a biggie. It's already there if you're on a but you also use the hybrid app launcher in 2013 and 2016. So you can add Dell OneDrive for Business and custom O365 tiles. So if you're already in the O365 and you know you're familiar with the tiles up in the left-hand corner, you'll also get a custom app launcher that's similar to that to give you a similar look and feel, so that when a user is going from on-prem to the cloud or something, it looks sort of the same. They did recently change, I believe, the way the 2013 app launcher looks. Well, what they did was they made the 2013 app launcher look like the tiles did, and Microsoft went and changed the tiles again in 10. So it doesn't look like the same in 2013.
Now that being said, I don't know if we have it up here. Something that's still in the Office 365 is you can add custom tiles to all of people's app launcher in Office 365.
Yes. I didn't cover that here, but yeah, so.
It's not really a hybrid thing, but it's helpful hybrid scenarios.
Yeah.
And in reverse, in Office 365, you can have a tile.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I haven't played around with that much, to be honest with you, because
Just upload a link in it.
yeah, it's not really that complicated to customize it, and again, it only sort of looks like the existing one since they changed it again. So I wouldn't necessarily. That's not a reason to choose hybrid or not. It's just right. It's a little bit of an integration feature. Because 2013 looks so much different than say O365. Hybrid auditing. This is, I think, still in preview. Some tenants might be getting it now. It only works in 2016 right now. So you can get reporting now in a hybrid scenario in O365 for users accessing on-prem data. You have your hybrid setup. I don't know of anybody's tenant that has this yet, because I don't know of anybody who's running 2016 on-prem in a hybrid environment. But it is in preview and is supposed to be coming. So that reporting that we're all used to in O365 for accessing SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams data is now available to report on on-premise data in a hybrid. Hybrid taxonomy. You can replicate your managed metadata. I forgot to capitalize that. Look at that. Anyway, content types from the cloud to on-prem. So if you've gone in 365 and you've set up customization in your search, you can populate all that down to on-prem now in the hybrid scenario.
And continue to leverage the content type of that existing cloud. Are they going to make that hybrid able or be published on-prem?
I don't know. I can find out. I don't know. And I don't know. There's not a lot of data right now about that particular feature other than it's listed as a feature. And I have yet to work with anybody or know of anybody that's actually implemented it yet. So it's an interesting feature because why would you want to have to rebuild everything? You wouldn't. And so in the cloud hybrid scenario, it makes sense because you're managing your metadata and content types in the cloud, and that will publish to both locations. In the federated, that does not work because your index is in 2 different locations. So that much now. Hybrid search breakdown. So there's a couple different kinds of roadmaps that Microsoft has come up with. The first one is the federated hybrid search. This used to be called inbound, outbound hybrid search when they first rolled it out. Now they changed the name to federated. So inbound, you can search on-premise or Home 365. That does require a reverse proxy in your on-premise environment, if that would work. Outbound, I'll bring that up too, so we'll get to that. Outbound search is you search Home 365 from your on-premise SharePoint environment. These are the most common types of hybrid scenarios that have been set up. The next one we'll get into is less common, but actually a little bit more powerful. So some limitations, a little bit. Results are displayed 2 result blocks when you're in a federated hybrid search. What that means is if anybody here has set up search in their environment, you get your results that show up in a result block. In a hybrid scenario, you'll have your O365, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, however you've configured it and named it, block. And then you'll have your on-premise block. There are some limitations to that too. The block will only show so many search results. You may have 5,000 results from that environment. The block is only capable of showing you a few at a time. So it is the limitation in the federated hybrid scenario. You can configure the federated scenario very easily with the hybrid picker or PowerShell. Either one, the hybrid picker works really well. That's very easy. We'll get into that. It does require that you replace your default security token certificate. When you install SharePoint on-prem 2013 or 2016, by default, it installs its own STS certificate. That certificate will not work with O365, so you have to replace it. There's a process to do that. It's not too terribly complicated. You can use a self-sign cert for a UAT or a test environment. Not recommended to do that for a production environment because you have to replace the self-sign cert every year. And I wouldn't want to do that every year, and you shouldn't want to do that either. So it is recommended by a cert. I've actually been running into a lot of scenarios lately in the work that I'm doing where clients are not managing their certs very well. So if you're getting into a scenario where you need to replace a cert, I'm always going to recommend buy the 3-year or 5-year cert, spend the extra money, because if you can't manage the certs, you're just going to run into a problem down the road. Then you're ended up swapping out certs all the time. So that's fairly easy to do. We'll get into that in a minute. In the federated scenario, it does not require AFFs for a single sign-on solution. You actually can get the federated hybrid solution to work without SSO in place. You won't see a lot of documentation on it, but you actually can do it. All it requires is that you are syncing your users with AD Connect, what used to be called DirSync, and every user that you're syncing has to have an email address. Does not have an email address, it will not authenticate properly. And then down here we've got Microsoft's little diagram of how this federated search ends up working together. You'll have your content on-premise. It has its own search index. And you'll have your O365 content with its own search index. And your O365 can search back and forth with on-prem and vice versa. The key to this is there are two indexes. That's why you get two result blocks. That's why there are some limitations. But this worked very well. So I'm going to just go over basic steps. The idea behind this presentation was to introduce hybrid, why you might want to use it, and get into a little bit of how you set it up, because it can be very complicated, very difficult to track down some documentation on it. But again, Microsoft is better. They're getting better at it. Well, you're going to run into little things here and there that you're just not. It's not in their documentation. So I wanted to cover a little bit of that basic steps, and then maybe we'll do another presentation of a really deep dive demo. 4 basic steps. Install your infrastructure for your requisites. That's kind of the basic that Microsoft says for everything, right? You're going to need patches or CUs on your on-prem environment. They're very small. So you got, I have that as sync your identities. Goes without saying. So one of the first things you would have to put in place after SharePoint patching your CUs is syncing your users to your tenant setup. This is a new environment. Get email with Azure Access Control Services. It sounds complicated. It's not really that complicated. Basically, what you're doing is you're setting up trust between your on-premise environment and your share. That's a service part of the environment in a section of your CPS. This process sets that up so that the service application proxy can communicate with O365, authenticate over OAuth, over HTTP or HTTPS, and hand off the user information for security triggering purposes. So, you have to figure out how to set this up. You do have to install the search first. It's also part of it if you're using PowerShell. And then the last step is to configure your SharePoint on-premises search. That's your sources, your result sources, your crawl rules, all of that. Setting up hybrid will not do that for you. All you're really doing is setting up the trust and the authentication between the two environments. You still have to set up your search service workloads yourself. If you're doing this in a new environment, you have to set them up from scratch. If you're doing this on an existing environment, you may have to move those workloads wherever makes sense, depending on how you're in. And then I have the link here for the outbound roadmap and the configuration steps in greater detail. And again, we can go over that in the presentation. Outbound. That's supposed to say inbound. I'll change that. Or just everybody make a note. There's essentially 3 steps. The inbound federated scenario. You need to install a reverse proxy on your on-premise environment so that O365 can authenticate back to that environment. That comes along with whatever reverse proxy that you want to use. Microsoft only lists 2 that, there are more devices and scenarios out there for a reverse proxy. But just know that you'll have to put that infrastructure in place before you can begin that. Figure your secure store service, figure your SharePoint online search, your workloads, and then there's the inbound roadmap. So Still have to swap out, still have to swap out the cert, still have to, but these are the other 4 steps that are involved in inbound. Still have to sync your users, all of that. So it kind of goes hand in hand. Well, these are the different steps from outbound to inbound. So we'll go into the hybrid picker overview. The hybrid picker is what you can use to set up inbound and outbound scenario. It's the easiest way to do it. There may be times where you can get into the PowerShell method because something doesn't work right. But for now, we're going to go over this. So it enables that server-to-server trust. It sets up the trust in the on-premise environment, sets up the authentication. All you have to do is manage the cert. Just get the cert in place. It requires that you're going to need to be a global admin in your 365 environment and farm admin in your on-premise environment to run the picker. Run the picker on a SharePoint on-premise server. It can be a web front end, or it can be an app server, whatever server you think can handle the load. If it's a single server, obviously it's going to go onto that one. It just invokes a click to run installer. We'll go through the screenshots in a minute, which I borrowed from somebody else because I didn't have access to them, so I borrowed that from somebody else. It literally only takes 5 minutes to run this thing, and again, it does not configure your search workload. Just do all that. So here's a couple screenshots that I stole from somebody else. His name's Paul, Microsoft MVP. Forgot his last name. Great guy. Anyway, I stole his slides. Everything that I actually. So what you'll do is you go into your hybrid, configured hybrid configuration. You'll download the hybrid picker. Excuse me. On your app server. Click it. Hit next. These are some of the options that you're going to get here, screen by screen. First one pops up, use your current Windows account credential. If you're running this on your on-premise environment, log in as a farm admin. That. Enter your O365 global admin account there, authenticate. Now what this will do is it'll then check all the prerequisites. Checking if you have the proper patches, you have the proper C level for the environment, which I have those in slides later. Make sure that you have service application proxies configured, if they're not, that are needed for this, app management, user profiles. These don't pass, it'll bomb out. You gotta go fix that and then run it again. Then it gets to what do I want to do? So you can choose hybrid OneDrive, hybrid sites, hybrid app launcher, hybrid B2B. And those are your options that you're going to choose for the inbound, outbound scenario. Then when you click next, checks them all off, done. All you have to do before you do this is swap out the cert. It's a small PowerShell script to do that. If you choose hybrid sites in this, set up the server-to-server trust for you, so you do not need to use PowerShell to actually do that. So it will do all the PowerShell behind the scenes and set up the ACS trust in your on-premise environment, so you don't have to do that piece. All you have to do is swap your cert out, run this, sync in your users, and theory, everything should work okay. So the other scenario version, there's a couple scenarios, but basically it's called Cloud Hybrid Search. This is supported for SharePoint 2013 and 2016. And we February CU 2016 for SharePoint 2013 for this to work. You can create a search plus service application in your on-premise environment simply now, simply by checking the checkbox when you create a new search service application and say that you want it to be a cloud. You can do it that way, or you can do it with PowerShell. Do that a search service application either way. There are two scripts to run to set up the cloud scenario. One is to create the cloud SSA, same as the checkbox. So if you don't like PowerShell and you just want to use that, again, we're still going to need to use PowerShell for this part down here. And the onboard cloud hybrid search, this is directly from Microsoft. You can download it off the TechNet that I've linked to get that PowerShell script. It sets up the cloud SSA trust. So the difference here in the architecture here is once you've done a cloud hybrid search, your index is no longer on-prem. Your index moves out to the cloud right here. And all of your searching from either environment simply runs off of one index in both 365. That's where you manage content sources, result sources, etc. Some of the breakdown of the search, the cloud hybrid scenario is crawl and parse on-premise content, process and index in the 365. There's the differences. They're breaking up some of that workload process and offloading up to the 365. Something to know for security purposes, all of the content that is searched is encrypted between on-prem and 365. So people have concerns about interception of search data. It's encrypted. It's encrypted between the crawler and the processing in 365. Search results from both on-prem and 365. Crawling configuration, including your SSA, search service application, content sources, crawl roles, etc. It's configured on-prem. Modification of the search experience, i.e. the search schema changes are performed in 365. So what they're saying here is you would still set up content sources for on-prem, crawl roles on-prem. Search schema changes if one way you do it up in the cloud, that's what the processing and indexing is. Does that make sense? Probably getting a little too technical for this one, which is why I'm trying to keep it simple. This is the logical architecture that Microsoft puts out for how it does crawling in this particular scenario. You've got diversity from AD Connect, going up to Azure AD. That gives you how all of this is breaking down when it comes to searching and indexing for content. Don't know why. They included SP 2010 in 2007. This doesn't work with that. So I always found that one interesting, but that's what we get about it. Configuration. Obviously, you need to sync your users to through AD Connect. None of this will work if your users are not in Daubert. So you can create your cloud search service application. You have three options: manually with the checkbox, a hybrid picker, or with PowerShell. It's all your onboarding prerequisites. Those are the CUs and patches that you need in your infrastructure to make all of this work. There's a couple other requirements that we'll get to in another slide for some of this. If you don't run if you choose not to use the hybrid picker, you have to run the onboarding script in PowerShell. You can do it either way. Most people that I've run across and from Microsoft seem to suggest that using PowerShell scripts works better for this. I've done it both ways. I didn't see any difference. Take that for whatever it is. Create your on-prem content sources. Configure your outbound query federation. That really just simply means, it sounds complicated. Really what you're doing there is you're setting up your result sources on-prem to query and federate out to both 365. You have all of this in place, that's essentially what you're doing there. Configure your search vertical. What that means is you're going into your result blocks and your search results, and you're adding some more functionality to it from an end user perspective. It basically says, here's your on-premise data, here's your SharePoint Online. I mean, you can branch that out and make it as easy or as complicated as you want it to be. Some users might get complicated if all of their results are together and they don't know if it's on-premise or if it's in the cloud. So you can configure your search vertical to split that out. It simply says, I've searched for Jeff. Now I want to look for Jeff on-premise, or I want to look for Jeff in SharePoint Online in this search vertical, or I want to look for Jeff in OneDrive for Business, or whatever. So you can configure that as needed. And then you have your cloud hybrid roadmap and configuration steps in far greater detail with this link here. Some hybrid search issues. Sync users are missing an email address or there's a UPN mismatch. That will break it, it won't work. So you have to have an email address. And if UPNs in your on-premise environment are not matching your O365 environment, which they should be if you've already moved to the cloud, this is going to cause a problem. So it will not work unless you've gone through the steps which are outside of the scope of search to get your new on-premise UPNs to match your O365 environment. There can be some issues installing the Azure Active Directory module for PowerShell, and I've linked a fix for that. That's something that's needed if you're going to configure any of this with PowerShell. You need to be able to log into your O365 Azure environment with PowerShell. And there's a little funky thing that can happen depending on the version of PowerShell that you have, et cetera, et cetera. So just some little caveat things. On-premise environment is not HTTP, it's HTTPS. So if your on-premise environment is not using SSL, but your cloud environment is, this won't work unless you change your OAuth to over HTTP. Because then it can still communicate with the cloud on either one. We got to set this with PowerShell. It's like a 2-line PowerShell thing. Switch it back and forth. So you'd like to think that there aren't very many on-premise environments not running SSL, but there are. There are a lot. Okay, so that's a caveat. Why isn't this working? It's because you have to. There's a little extra step in there to switch OAuth over to HTTP. This one is, I've highlighted it and it's in red because I ran it to this and it drove me nuts for 3 weeks. And I didn't get any help on this. I literally searched to the end of Google and back, and there isn't anything out there on this. I opened Case with Microsoft on it, and they didn't help me. And until we did a lot of verbose logging, and I Googled everything that I could find in those logs, did I actually find this? And then when I brought it back to Microsoft, it said, oh yeah, buried way down deep in our notes here, there's an issue. And you won't find it on any of the roadmaps or tech nets that I've linked to, which is if your search service application proxy is partitioned, this won't work.
How do you partition an application proxy?
So, good question. Right, great question. So, when you build SharePoint using the UI, click and run and install it, it's not partitioned. If you use SP Auto Installer, which most of us are familiar with, it's got sections in there for partitioning or not. So you need to make sure that it's not partitioning your application's search service application proxy.
What is the partition between?
So that's where it gets slightly complicated because you can partition your indexes to be on more than one server. And you can partition the proxy to communicate on more than one server.
Oh, okay, that's what I wasn't following. Okay, so it's the proxy is partitioned to facilitate partition.
Yeah, and so when you think about this in the context of what partitioning means, it's just really just splitting out the workload or the processes to more than one server. It makes sense why this doesn't work. Because if you set up and run your hybrid picker on one server and set up your trusts with one server in your environment, and it's trying to communicate with that and federate your users, but then it goes out and it hits a web front end, because there's also an applications service application, the partition also exists on, say, a web front end or another app server, and the trust has not been set up with that one, then it bombs out, and what you'll get is a 401 unauthorized error when you try to set up your result sources, your content sources, or anything. You get no indication as to why. It doesn't show up in the logs as to why you're not allowed, even though you're syncing your users. You're, in some cases, syncing your search on-premise search service account. You'll even sync that to the cloud and give it read access to a 365 environment. Still get denied. And it's because of this. So how does that happen? Well, this is how it happened to me, so I'm going to tell you, because I'm an idiot, and I don't want you to have to deal with it, right? How this happened to me was the environment that I installed and ran all of this on, because it was from scratch, was a brand new environment. I use Auto SP Installer, and when I do this, I always do it for everything in SharePoint, and everything went okay, but there was a little bit of a problem with search. It didn't provision it quite properly. So after everything was done, everything on the environment ran fine, I blew away the search, and I had my own PowerShell script that had partitioning enabled in it. We set up a new search service application proxy and a search service application. I didn't know that it was doing that, because I never paid attention, like you, Becky, as to why any of that would be partitioned. So, what I had to go in and do is blow away my search service application and proxy again. Now, I had the benefit of being able to do this because it was a brand new environment. That doesn't exactly work in an existing environment, which we'll get here in a second, but I blew everything away after 3 or 4 weeks of researching this and not finding anything. I came across a couple of different things that pointed me in the right direction. And I rebuilt search. No partitioning on the index and no partitioning on the search service application proxy. As soon as I did that, fired up my result sources, everything magically works. So if it's all split up, it's not going to work. And nobody will tell you why. So it's a big gotcha that I think Microsoft needs to put in their documentation, and I have yet to see it. Because everybody will tell you when you're talking about hybrid how easy it is to set up. And it is in the federated scenario. In fact, the cloud is not that difficult to set up either. If it's so easy, why did I spend 3 weeks trying to get a 401 unauthorized to actually go away? So that's why it is in their documentation. If you're really proud about it and get them, oh yeah, that's a known thing. Okay, you didn't bring that up to me before. So it's there, and it's a gotcha. You got to make sure that that's not in place. So if you have an existing environment, there are PowerShell scripts out there that can modify your search topology for you, and it will remove the partitioning for your search indexes and your search service application proxy and shift it all around for you on the fly, and you're good to go. There's also some quick PowerShell out there that will actually just rebuild the search service application proxy real quick. So what I noticed is, in particular, so what I did in this environment, just to make sure double safe, blah, 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 I made sure that the indexes were partitioned and the search service application proxy wasn't partitioned. What I've discovered, though, is you don't necessarily have to have a single partition for the indexes. It really only has to do with the proxy. Proxies communicating on more than one server to your indexes, then it can authenticate and trust it. So as long as you fix the application proxy, you don't have to blow away the search, just blow away the application proxy, rebuild a new one associated with your search service application. It should start working. In a new environment, my recommendation would be do what I did. blow the whole thing away, rebuild it with a PowerShell script, or use AutoSP installer again and make sure you're not doing any partition. Now, some would argue that that is a limitation, and I would agree that is a limitation, right? If you have a 9-server on-premise farm and you want to set this up, and you have your application, service application proxy partitioned across several servers, for redundancy purposes, because you don't want that to go down, well, if this only works because it's on one, then that's a limitation. I would agree, it is a limitation, so just keep that in mind. So that's just some gotchas just to keep in mind. And then here we have the prerequisites. So for 2013, these are the cumulative updates that you need to get the features in one hybrid. Specifically, if you're wanting OneDrive for business sites for B2B, it needs to be 2015 speed level. If you want to get into more specifics about the taxonomy and content types, you can be on that actually. Whether 2016, those will be relatively those features. So other things that you're going to need to get this done, you're going to need to install your Microsoft Online Services sign-in assistant on your whatever server, whatever machine that you're running all the PowerShell from. You're going to need to install that there. If you're doing this on the SharePoint server only, you're going to need to install it there, or workstation. Doesn't matter, but you have that. You also need the Azure Active Directory PowerShell module. There's a link to it. Install it, and the fix in case you have the issues earlier. We'll also need the SharePoint Online Management Shell. Also, you need to download that module from PowerShell if you're going to work in any of these PowerShell scripts for this. And then I've got some links to how to plan for hybrid. You know, just some worksheets that Microsoft provides to go through whether you need it or whether you don't, or do, what you might need to plan for to get you there. This link here is a link to all of the roadmaps and configuration steps, including how to configure your result sources and all of that in whichever environment you're in, depending on which hybrid scenario that you're in. So we didn't go to that level of detail here. It would take way too long to go through all of that. So I did link all of them in case you want to just look at all of them. That's it. That's who I work for. Here's what we do. And do we have any questions?
So, not having really all the prior experience, but when you say this is really practical to do, stable on that more so 2013 and 16. Does it really work for 2013?
It does work in 2013. Yeah. Now, I haven't personally done it in 2013. I've done this in 2016. This, from what I have heard and been told, this works equally as well in 2015 now that they've patching, add some functionality on the SKUs, patching, and essentially you're going to get the same experience in either environment except for the app launcher. The difference there is just how it looks. I honestly don't think Microsoft wants to put any effort into fixing the app launcher for 2013. We're already looking at 2019, people are on 2016. So it looks as good as it's going to look. It still looks like tiles, and that's all they're probably going to do with it. Functionality-wise, all of these should work the same if you're patched up. No questions? That's no fun.
All right, well, thank you so much, Don. We appreciate it.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
the time and sharing that with us. And We are recording it right now, and we do have a YouTube channel for tech events, our user group nonprofit. So, we will post this on the YouTube channel, and I'll try and send out the link to the attendees afterwards, so you can get access to it, once it's been posted. I think that, that's it. Thank you